Marcus Atilius Regulus isn't an especially well-known figure in the modern world, but he was incredibly important to the Romans because he was a pillar of civic virtue, which is something that we all strive to obtain. Marcus Atilius Regulus was a Roman consul who served during the First Punic War, so around about 260 BC. And he was well known as a very good general. In fact, before the particular conundrum for which he's known, he had beaten the Carthaginians, who were the Punic enemy that was faced during the Punic War, at a battle near their capital, Carthage, in modern-day Tunisia. Now, being a Roman, and of course very impetuous, after just basically destroying the Carthaginians outside of Carthage, he demanded their immediate surrender. Now, instead of having the intended effect of Carthage surrendering, instead Carthage decided, well, fuck you, and then destroyed his army and captured him. The rest of the situation is described very aptly by St. Augustine in the City of God. Marcus Atilius Regulus, a Roman general, was a prisoner in the hands of the Carthaginians, but they, being more anxious to exchange their prisoners with the Romans than to keep them, sent Regulus as a special envoy with their own ambassadors to negotiate his exchange, but bound him first with an oath that if he failed to accomplish their wish, he would return to Carthage. He went and persuaded the Senate to the opposite course, because he believed it was not for the advantage of the Roman Republic to make an exchange of prisoners. After he had thus exerted his influence, the Romans did not compel him to return to his enemy, but what he had sworn he voluntarily performed. But the Carthaginians put him to death with refined, elaborate, and horrible tortures. Now his death is like something out of a Slayer album. They shut him up in a narrow box in which he was compelled to stand, and in which finely sharpened nails were fixed all around about him, so that he could not lean upon any parts of it without intense pain, and so they killed him by depriving him of sleep. I suppose you'd expect such psychotic shit from people who worshipped Baal. So most people would say that Regulus was being a complete idiot. He was in Rome with the entire Roman Republic backing him, saying, look, stay here, you don't have to. But he went anyway because he gave his word. Now, modern people would probably have just stayed there because, knowing what the Carthaginians were like, with their worship of Baal and Molech, you'd probably not want to fall into their hands, but this Chad right here, nope, he went and he faced them down. So we can learn a number of things from this, and I think that the one that we as an audience lack is that we need to have some level of loyalty to the state. We need to have loyalty to our own peoples, at least insofar as we don't betray them or lie to them or break oaths. Now, of course, what he's doing there, when he said, no, it's not worth exchanging the prisoners, is that he's being loyal to the Roman state by telling them outright, there is no point to do this, even though he is risking his life in doing so, because he recognises that the state and the people are fundamentally more important than him, and so he goes and sacrifices himself, which is what we as men are called to do. We must continually sacrifice ourselves for our family, for our God, and for our nation. That is what makes a man, and Marcus Atilius Regulus fulfills it in this case. On top of this, the most successful peoples in existence have placed an absolutely crucial importance on truth, be them the Romans, be them the Persians, be them the Israelites, and be them Christians. The truth is fundamentally the most important thing, because it's by the truth that we live successful lives. If we live a life of lies, we can't properly direct ourselves towards truth, or towards goodness, because truth and goodness are in a lot of ways the same thing. So, knowing this, Regulus does not break his oath, because he said to the Carthaginians, in spite of the fact that they were a hated enemy, The Romans wrote about how they would sacrifice their babies to their god, right? And the Romans all knew this. In spite of this, he kept his oath because he realised the value of truth, and also the risks to the society if that was broken. And this ties into what it means to be a consul in Rome in that period, because during the 3rd century BC, Rome was fundamentally ran with 2 executives, 2 consuls. In fact, at the Battle of Cannae, which you may have heard of, in 216 BC, Hannibal really turned up the heat for the Roman Republic by killing one of the consuls in battle. The other one barely escaped. And so, just have an idea of how important it is to be the consul, and Regulus, being the consul, realised that it was important that he demonstrated to his society the absolute sheer importance of truth to the point of death, because we ultimately learn from our leaders, be them de facto or de jure in the case of Regulus. Lives destroy friendships and they destroy families, and even more so the state, because the state needs to know what's going on, otherwise it will be collapsing. If you have a vow, you must keep it, because it needs to be relied upon. And although no one would really blame Regulus for not keeping the vow, it doesn't set a particularly good precedent, does it? If the Romans are there as the civilizing force, and they're lying to their opponents, then what does that speak of their moral character? And what does it speak of yours, indeed, if you have great enemies and you lie in order to destroy them? And may I remind you that, partly as a result of this action, Rome won the First Punic War. In fact, Rome had utterly destroyed Carthage about 100 years after Regulus's heroic sacrifice. And through that sacrifice, they were able to overcome. Because if he'd just gone and lied, then it would undermine how other people treated the consul. And if you have problems with how you're treating your leader, then that of course influences the organisation of armies, taxations, etc, etc. So, if there is one thing that I'd like you to take from this video, it's that you should not lie ever. And if you keep a vow, even if it's to horrible people, you ought to keep it. As long as it's of course not something that's ridiculous. However, a second thing that I'd like to encourage, because in these circles it's particularly lax, is that we need to be loyal to our states. We need to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. We may not like our leaders, and our leaders may be reprobates, but they are still nonetheless our leaders, and are deserving of our respect. And that's not a particularly popular opinion to express, but it's something nonetheless that we need to do if we want to have homes to stay in. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks so much to all the new Renaissance Man subscribers, because we've grown massively over the last month or so. So many more people are enjoying audiobooks and controversial videos than were before. So I really hope those who are watching would consider signing up, because these people are clearly enjoying what they're getting. Thank you very much for watching.